You are listening to Sect Respect with Lewis Lovelace. Warning, listening to this podcast confirms that you are a free thinker and therefore a threat to the establishment. Stay vigilant. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Sect Respect, the bi-weekly breakdown of clandestine conspiracies. Remember, that is once every other week, not twice a week. Please stop sending me emails. First off, big shout out to my patrons and well-wishers. I'm feeling very much better from my bout of Havana syndrome since my interview on 60 Minutes. I appreciate all the well wishes. Please do not send me any gifts or anything. My address changes once every 3 months. It's not going to get to me. I promise you that. Remember, before we continue, if you really want to support this podcast, you could go on to sectrespect.com. I have a oxycodone on there. I have basic loratadine, your basic OTCs, and maybe some hydrochloroquine. And just, any like tote bags, coffee mugs, merchandise. If you really want to support this podcast, sectrespect.com, that is where you want to go. Okay, back to the show. Today we have with us our guest, Dr. Bitterson, a psychologist at the University of the Salt Mines. Dr. Fleeb, PhD, a professor of history at the Tarrant County Community College. And our third guest does not wish to be named. There was no job description given with that, but I've been assured by my producers that she is a resident expert on the topic of hand. It is actually good that we have two doctors with us today because our topic of discussion is the death of Reginald Josiah Garthwaite. And the, I will say, possible involvement of his younger brother, Rufus Zachariah Garthwaite. Dr. Fleeb, let's start with you. It seems you have some pretty strong feelings on the matter.
Well, this is, it's a theory that's been floated around for a very long time, as any sort of incident like this involving a great human being is, where people try to cloud it, try to, discredit or diminish the excellence of someone else. But I mean, it's very cut and dry.
Right.
So you're saying that the fog of history essentially has fallen over this particular event.
People want to wrap their own mythos around things like this. They want to add all of this other speculation, grandeur, like create some sort of mythology around it when it's really just a tragedy that happened and could, as I've said before, it could have happened to anyone. It was a terrible tragedy, and I don't understand why we consistently have to drag this out like some sort of nefarious thing happened. He fell from a cliff. He hit his head repeatedly on a rock. Reverberations. It could happen to anyone. Could have happened to anyone.
Right. The tree, you're forgetting the tree branch that also fell on.
Well, yeah, he did hit the tree branch. He hit that, and then that fell on him right. As well. Which is a testament to the Garthwaite bloodline as to how resilient he was, which also showed up in Rufus.
All right. How do I address you, Miss? How should I continue to address you for the duration of this show? Is there a code name you would like me to go by? I know your name is redacted on here, but
I mean, it's fine. I figure that the audience here is not quite as large, so I'm fine with you calling me Gina.
We actually have quite a large following. I have been able to
Right.
pay a substantial fraction of a percentage of my medical bills from the
Sure,
proceeds
sure. I
from the
mean,
patrons of this show. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So
right.
however you would like to be addressed, I would like to put it to you because you seem to also have some opinions about the death of Reginald Garthwaite here.
Oh, I have many opinions, and I just said you can call me Gina, so I don't like to repeat myself. That is one of my opinions. So go ahead and take that as you will for the rest of the show. I don't want it to be any longer than it has to be. Um, I guess I was really on board with Fleeb there for the beginning of his statement. I just feel like I feel like there's some piece you're missing when you say, yeah, it was a tragedy, of course. It really colored the rest of, Garthwaite's life. But I think that what you're missing is when you try to say there was nothing nefarious. Well, that's just an outright delusion. Uh
That's
the
a very strong accusation to put towards a doctor with a PhD.
Thank you. It was meant to be. Uh I would say now I don't think I'm going to go quite the direction you think because I am a Garthwaite stan. I absolutely do not believe that he pushed his brother. I think that it is 100% without a doubt the case that Reginald took a look at our hero and said, "This kid is up and coming. I've been the golden child my entire life, and my parents don't notice what he's up to yet," right? But he was smart. For all of his faults, Reginald was a smart kid, and he saw where Rufus was going to go. And he said, "I don't want to lose my status as the golden child. And what can I do to make sure I go down in my parents' memory and history and forever and ever? We're still talking about it over 100 years later. What can I do to stay that golden standard of a Garthwaite?" And he jumped. He waited for the moment he was alone with his brother. When did they ever go together? Never. They were never alone together. On his birthday of all days. What a memorable day. He took him on a walk and jumped off the cliff.
So we have two very different, and Dr. Fleeb, I will get back to you in just a second.
I'm sorry. That's one of the most absolutely insane things I have ever heard in my life. And I agree with you almost 100%. I've never heard that sort of theory put forward before, but Rufus was that kind of person.
Yes.
He was clearly destined for greatness. And I am willing to entertain the notion that Reginald got out of the way.
So we
have Rufus to be.
Oh, no, that's where we
brilliant.
disagree.
We have the position.
I don't know who you are, but I agree with what you said.
We must first. I want to get everybody's take on the issue before we get into the wider discussion. Dr. Bitterson, so far we have heard possibly that this just could be a tragic accident, and also that this could be a apparent suicide by Reginald. I want to hear what your take on the matter is. I know we discussed briefly before we began this show.
Right. Yeah. First, I want to say thank you, Lewis, for inviting me. I'm very honored to be on your show. I hope you get the funds you need to continue to go. I do want to make one statement, though, real quick. I feel like it's my duty, my ethical and slightly legal obligation to correct some statements here. I know I believe Gina, you wanted to go by, right? She made a statement that Dr. Fleeb was based on delusions. And I have to quote the DSM here that, quote, "Delusions are fixed beliefs that are not amenable to change in light of conflicting evidence, and evidence being the operative word, because you need substantial evidence in order to refute that. And I don't believe there's a lot of evidence for us to know whether, Reginald was shoved or not, which is, the whole topic of this debate here, with all respect to you. With that said, I think it's important to point out that psychology can obviously be a huge factor that drives us. Rather, it's the primary factor. 98% of what we do is based on psychology and our upbringing and our foundation of what we do. And I think it's not far-fetched to say that he could have pushed Reggie off the cliff, but it wasn't his own fault to do it. He was driven to do it. So an argument could be made that he's guilty, but guilty by insanity, or rather not guilty by reason of insanity.
So what I'm basically hearing from everybody is that there has not been any sort of argument yet made that Rufus Garthwaite acted with malicious intent.
Oh, he definitely
Correct.
did.
I don't think any of us are here to argue that point. No.
Oh, right.
A man that is that honest and great and pure would never, in his wildest dreams,
And he became president.
President.
Thank you.
He became president of the United States. We all know
He did, and there has never been a bad president of the United States.
And he swore on a Bible.
He swore on a Bible. He did. Thank you, Gina. He swore on a Bible, and once you do that, come on.
Although I understand, Dr. Bitterson, I will get to you in just a second, but I would like to add in the comment that this is before we added the under God to our Pledge of Allegiance. So the swearing of the Bible, this is for viewers that are familiar with the show. There is a section, a fragment of my audience that believes that swearing on the Bible was not valid until the under God was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. So just to clarify that for those.
I understand that the intention was always there.
Exactly. He did it though. Whether it was
did it. Thank you,
Dr. Bitterson.
So obviously I go back to the psychology thing because it's what I do, but everything that we do is driven down there. Like I said, it's about 98% of what drives us. There's still that 2% where we get to decide the choices that we do in life. And there could have been a choice. It's very hard to prove at this point in time, where he decided that I am going to purposefully and maliciously shove my brother off of the cliff.
I just don't see that
a
happen.
lot of conjecture on your end, Doctor.
Yeah. You weren't there.
I know I wasn't. And neither were
and you look at the rest of his life and all the good that he did. How could someone who has put that much good out there do something so horrendous?
Horrendous. Yes.
If I could bring up, one of the founding theories of modern psychology, you have Adlerian.
Go ahead. I'm going to eat a pistachio.
Yeah. Adlerian theory talks about, the birth order of children. So you could look at this from a number of different ways. There's a number of ways. For instance, you could look at the oldest son. So Reggie, obviously, typically when there is the oldest child.
Oh, they're on a nickname basis.
I could call him Reginald if it brings more respect to you.
I would prefer it.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
It was his name.
Okay. So Reginald, obviously the oldest son, and when you have an oldest son, you have another child. So when you have that other child that's younger than them born, the oldest son tends to be, dethroned. They're dethroned by the next child. He has to learn to not be by himself as he's being raised. He has to learn to share items, share toys, perhaps share food. The parent expectations are usually very high of the oldest son too, which probably leads to why Reginald was such a successful, son that he was, growing up. Absolutely. And often he was given responsibility to, as expected, to, set an example for Rufus growing up too. It tends to grow up sometimes with authoritarian or sometimes be strict, but we didn't really see any of that. There was a lot of goodness that Reginald was grown into, certainly. But obviously with the second son that's born, there's always someone ahead of him. And that can create malicious intent in us if we look at it through the wrong lens. There's a lot more competition that comes into play. There are wants to often overtake the oldest son that come into play over here. And this is, again, according to Adlerian theory. He becomes, a rebel or trying
and to
to
get
outdo
this straight, you're not Adler, right? You're just recycling someone else's.
No. And yeah, and to be fair, this is one of the oldest theories. So a lot of these theories,
the oldest theories, so it must be.
So it's right.
If I may add some anecdotal evidence to that.
Please
to
do.
that theory.
Love it. I love anecdotal evidence.
I am the youngest of 6 siblings, and I understand that sort of feeling of being small. And this was, Rufus only had one older brother.
Mm-hmm. Right.
To have many more siblings, like I am essentially the little speck of dust floating in the air in
little
my household. Like, I understand, Dr. Bitterson, when you say that younger siblings,
we're like that thing you see in the eye.
Yeah. It's like those
little
floaties
floater.
that come on.
Yeah.
You're the last sea turtle to come out of the beach.
Oh, right. And the seagulls are all over you.
Right.
Oh,
right?
I see.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to fight even harder, which is what Rufus did.
Right. Totally. You're like the last nut that falls off a tree that's all like rotten inside, and the squirrels won't even touch it.
It's like when I shave my leg and it's all clean except for the one
That
little
one
ingrown
hair.
the one hair that
And
will-
And then
find
you
the
go
next
back
day.
and shave it or pick at it, and it just is like bloody and pussy and a mess and worse. And you should have just left it be, but you couldn't because it was so disgusting, like looking at you. You had to deal with it.
100%.
that is
Or
what
like that
being the
last cherry
youngest-
blossom.
I like to think of it like, having many mothers and fathers as you're growing up, but I could definitely see how
How
you
is
all
that?
How
have-
confusing.
Yeah. Many mothers and fathers?
Well, sure, as the youngest child,
Are
if you
you
have
Mormon?
6 siblings that are older than you, they're there
He
to
had
teach
one
you, to
sibling.
grow, to
He had
educate
one
them.
sibling.
Yeah, this is neither here nor there. We're talking about one sibling, and let's be honest, that older sibling peaked in elementary school and could see
Thank
it.
you.
The writing was on the wall, and he jumped off a cliff.
I don't know if I
Tale as
agree
old
with
as
that,
time.
but he definitely had a tragedy that formed what Rufus was going to go through for the rest of his life. A foundation for him to be strong.
So we have several. We need to get on with the show. I only have so much bandwidth.
I'm sorry.
So we have several competing positions. Well, I wouldn't say competing, but several different positions, generally falling under that it was a tragic accident, or Reginald committed suicide, or that Rufus Garthwaite indeed committed the act, but not with malicious intent. Those are sort of the positions that we're working with. I want to pose a question, get this discussion started. Perhaps a little out of left field. Do you think Reginald's death was necessary to Rufus Garthwaite's path to the White House?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that one. Yeah, no, Reginald was the foundation for what Rufus needed to be a great American. That tragedy formed his life.
Yes.
I offer that question because I want to bring up a point that a friend of a friend brought up to me the other day that I found very interesting, that looking at the circumstantial evidence and the interpersonal relationships between Rufus Garthwaite and his father, this friend of a friend had opened up the possibility that Randolph Beauregard Garthwaite was the one to have murdered Reginald Garthwaite on that day, as the first step to propelling his youngest son towards the White House and towards the position of leader of the free world.
I don't like saying things like this to people, especially because you've been so nice to invite me onto the show, but that's insane.
again,
That's
this is
an
not
insane
my
thing.
this is not my theory. You can easily say that friends of my friends are insane, and
The friends of your friends are insane. He loved him. He loved his son, and it was a terrible tragedy, and it propelled Rufus into a direct. No father knows what their son is going to do, and that is what makes the Garthwaite story so incredible. That he came from that level of loss and hardship.
Dr. Bitterson.
I'm sorry. I just have to jump in here again to clarify. I want to touch on something Dr. Fleeb said. He claimed that you and your friends were insane. Definition of insanity, the most common one that we use, is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And that kind of brings to my other point.
That's in the DSM-5.
Can I clarify? Can I continue, please? Thank you. That was something coined by Albert Einstein. Now, Albert Einstein was born in 1879. And when did Reggie die? In 1878, which means that we have to use a different version of insanity here. Now, if we're talking about, if we're going again with my idea that he became insane, it's because, yes, he became insane because the definition of insanity was coined in a court case in 1847, which had to do with the Oliver Smith will case. You can look it up, Google or something, that coined the definition based on delusions. Now, again, these delusions could be created within Rufus based on the birth order of being the oldest, or excuse me, being the youngest. That is in reference to the ideas of the oldest. Now, again, these are held beliefs that people are held, that doesn't shift based on different circumstances that are created there, which again brings the point, it's impossible that his father would have killed him because Rufus needed that sort of psychological break in order to grow and to move on to become the presidency. You need that kind of.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to actually cut you off. Are you actually genuinely suggesting that Rufus's father killed Reginald?
No. I'm suggesting the opposite.
Now.
This is a friend of a friend.
Let me rephrase. It's impossible that Reginald's father pushed Reginald off that cliff. It had to be Rufus.
Absolutely.
Yes, it had to have been Rufus that did it. Nope.
Incorrect.
Gina, any further thoughts on that point?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to address that I think it's insane that you think I don't know the Oliver Smith case, Dr. Bitterson. But anyways, moving on. I had not heard that theory before, and I feel like it's very interesting. My only, I guess, critique is Rufus was the one that came back and reported what happened. So why wouldn't he say that Randolph did it? Unless, and so here's where I'm thinking, and what my gears have been turning about for the last couple minutes is, if this was all Randolph's plan to project him into greatness, he knew that there would be no logical reason to send him to boarding school without something bad happening. I am speaking, you spoke for like 10 minutes just a moment ago, please. And so if this were his plan in the long run and he wanted to cause, because Randolph didn't have a happy life and childhood, and look how great he grew, right? So if he did see that in Rufus and was like, I'm gonna break him so we can rebuild him better, and then I don't know, I'm trying to make it work because it's so good, but I don't know if I can do
that's
it.
Actually that's the perfect
minutes.
spot to segue. It's the perfect spot to segue because I simply wanted to get your thoughts on the theory as a whole before I sort of divulge into it. This is a whole.
Great.
I just want to clarify. I actually don't agree that he had a plan to push Reggie. Again, he was insane according to the definition of 1847. It wasn't his plan. It was his motivation to literally move forward to do it. He didn't do it on purpose. He's not guilty of it. Again, his psychology motivated him to do it.
Right,
It was an
right.
accident. It was an accident.
And
Yes.
I'm about to.
In a way, yes, you can argue
It
that
could
it
happen
wasn't
to
an-
anyone.
it could-
He fell off a cliff. He fell off a
Gentlemen.
cliff. He fell into a tree and then landed on a rock. All right. And his head hit
Pointy rock.
That's what happened. That's what happened.
I'm so sorry,
Gentlemen,
Lewis. I
gentlemen,
feel like my
there's
position
if
is
I may.
very narrow, like a pointy, narrow rock that goes inside of a ridge, and
Dr.
I just
Fleeb.
have to define
No,
that
no,
it's right
no.
there.
Dr. Fleeb.
I-
It
Dr. Fleeb.
happens to people constantly throughout, like every day. People that this happens constantly.
Yeah.
And the notion that there's this giant conspiracy by his father to kill his older brother, it makes no sense. It makes
Yeah.
no sense.
If
It's
I
a
may, Dr.
terrible
Fleeb,
thing
if I
that
may, Dr.
happened
Fleeb.
that formed his morality for the rest of his life
In the
and what made Rufus great.
in the
Mhm.
interest of
Right.
in the interest of fairness, I would like to sort of unwind the theory a bit more to present it, fairly and clearly as it was presented to me.
I am very interested in this.
in the
Please go on.
in this 4 hour discussion, and we'll let the audience again make their own conclusions. This is a platform for independent free thinking. I need to allow my audience that courtesy. So this theory essentially hinges on a particular aspect of that fateful morning, and that was have any of you heard of the Garden Stone?
What?
The garden stone at the edge of the rocky. So it was custom at the time to mark off the borders of one's estate
Right.
with stones, and even at Rocky Precipice, despite the very prominent landmark, it was customary for the Garthwaite family to have marked off the limits of their estate at the edge of the rocky precipice.
Of course, but they did so as was the custom at the time with
Right.
barbed wire.
Right.
Exactly. Now this garden stone, which this theory hinges on, it was supposedly removed by was supposedly removed by Randolph Beauregard Garthwaite the day beforehand, and it was this particular stone that Reginald, when he was looking out over the precipice and essentially surveying the vast territory that his family supposedly had claimed to, even though it was limited to the rocky precipice. Reginald would stand on the edge of this cliff and put his left foot on this garden stone. And,
the
and
idea-
his father understood this as a habit of his. And so the morning that Reginald took Rufus out to fly this kite, Randolph had already removed said stone, knowing that his oldest son would use it as a sort of a perch.
So, okay, I was really on board, but are you telling me that he just ran off a cliff, like he didn't see a cliff because a stone wasn't there? I just feel like that's a little too far out.
This also hinges on the second factor. This also hinges on the second factor in that,
please tell me.
While the moment before Reginald fell off this cliff, he had let the kite loose into the air. And so the theory essentially is that Reginald was not looking at the ground when he fell. He was showing and pointing to the kite to his younger brother, and he had stepped where he thought this stone was. And we all know that once we are familiar with a place, we can essentially walk through this space blindfolded. Like it's a space memory that Dr. Bitterson, I'm sure you can attest to that.
Yeah. It's like muscle memory, of course.
Exactly.
I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure if it was called muscle memory back in the day. I'd have to.
Probably not, because I don't think they were called muscles until
but
1883.
they had a conception.
You actually might be right.
Yeah, they had a conception at least of muscle
I
memory.
I can at least understand that theory because Reginald being an excellent older brother, because he is a Garthwaite, and he would have been an exceptional person, as is that family. I could see him wanting to attract attention for his younger brother. Look at the kite flying away.
Right.
that was very much.
And
I could see that. I could see that play out the exact opposite, where it's like, ha ha ha, look, I have a kite, you little shit. You don't have anything because mom and dad hate you, which is obviously the case.
Well, that makes no sense. He's let go of the kite at this point.
Either way,
the kite is just sticks.
Right. He has so much he gets from his parents. He doesn't even need this kite, this precious item. He's he let it go into the ether.
Either way, we agree that Reginald was focused on this kite at the moment.
He was definitely focused
of the accident, and this theory that Reginald fell is basically because he had misplaced his foot at where he thought this garden stone would be. And the third there, Dr. Fleeb, I promise I will get to you very soon. The third factor that felt strong enough and appealing enough to me to warrant my mentioning of it on this podcast was that Randolph Beauregard Garthwaite had an illegitimate brother. We'll get back to Sect Respect in just a second, but first, a word from our sponsor. Are you looking for a stocking stuffer for your non-denominational pagan holiday? Well, Just the Clip might be the one for you. That's all it is. An 1.5 inch stainless steel paperclip. We only sell stainless steel, and we only sell them at 1.5 inches. Just a clip. Just the clip. Welcome back to Sect Respect. I apologize for the strange break. There is a sponsored ad that I need to put in the middle of all these episodes, as you understand. I have to keep the lights on somehow. But the last. Where we left off was we were talking about Randolph Beauregard Garthwaite's illegitimate brother, essentially the uncle that Reginald and Rufus never knew about. Anyway, this illegitimate brother, whose name is lost to history, was apparently a member of the Grand Sultan's Cabinet of Enlightenment, the same Masonic order that Rufus Garthwaite himself would join on his path to the presidency. And I bring this up because this is the, if you recall, the third factor in the theory that Randolph Garthwaite was ultimately responsible for Reginald's death. Randolph's illegitimate brother had promised Randolph an inordinate sum of a truly otherworldly sum of money to essentially stage his oldest son's death, which was this theory, so it goes. Again, this is a friend of a friend. This is not my theory, but so it goes.
Not a real person.
This was essentially the first step in the wider ploy of the cabinet men to propel Rufus Zechariah Garthwaite to the office of the presidency and instate their global pan-Zoroastrianism.
Okay.
scheme.
I first of all, Randolph did not have an illegitimate brother. He had four
Thank
illegitimate
you.
brothers. Four of them. And
Wait,
they were
what?
big.
No.
Yes. Oh, yes. If you look, it's all there. If you look through his lost journals, it talks about all of his lost brothers. There's Timothy, there's Jeremiah, there is Aridus, and there is Michael.
You look at a photo of Rufus's father. You tell me that person was actually engaged in multiple relations.
Do you know? Have you ever looked at the It Girls from the 20s? They are hideous. Beauty standards have changed over time, and that guy was hot back in the day. I don't even want to say it, but he was okay. Look, terrifying. Agree to disagree. Anyways, what I am going to say as my main point is: are you trying to propose that Reginald did not actually die and it was just a front, or are you saying it was gone awry?
We all agree that Reginald went cold that day. We all agree that Reginald kicked the bucket, so to speak, on that morning.
Obviously,
we're simply debating the circumstances around that. And I will add, it is interesting that you add the three other illegitimate siblings. There have been I have looked into this after this 4-hour conversation with a friend of a friend. And it turns out that those other three could have been essentially penned in to those journals. As a way to sort of what's it called, dilute his father's sin.
It was a common trend during that time period.
Exactly.
Try and attach yourself to a prominent family.
It was also a very
It was also
trend.
a very common trend to sleep with other people who were not your wife and have other children.
That is correct. It is a common trend. I will
But
say
it
that
is also
having
a common trend when you do that to actually take care of them.
having one
None of that
illegitimate
happened.
child.
I don't.
Not common,
There's
not
no
common.
evidence. There is no evidence for these other.
It's written in his lost journals. Randolph Garthwaite's lost journals. If you look, I have copies of them on PDF.
Just like the Hitler diaries. I mean, come on.
If you've never read those, you are missing out.
I'm sorry.
Please, Dr. Bitterson.
I've had my hand up this entire time. Thank you.
I
appreciate that.
I'm sorry, Dr. Bitterson.
That's okay. You know, I get anger comes into play. It's all good. Look, I just want to say, I think it's totally plausible that it could be the father, that just a small chance, because there's theories out there, and there have been many of these instances over and over again where the father intends to bring up their child into greatness, and then through continued pressured activities over and over again, through continued deliberate practice, their child can come into expediency. There was a study done with a scientist and 2 children. They found a wife in an ad, raised their kids from birth to become chess players. And then lo and behold, they become world's greatest chess players. Same thing happened with Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods' father did the same thing. And then you look at Mozart. Mozart's father did the exact same thing too.
Okay, so I have a question. Do you have any opinions that are actually yours and weren't written by someone else? That's like my main question for you.
Facts are literally the definition of academia. You have to follow facts in order to make a good argument.
Theories.
Of course, facts are there was, the foundation of academia, but you're saying that, somebody else could just completely take over something. Are you saying that Tiger Woods is great because of his father?
Yes.
Because Reginald was fantastic because of himself, because of the circumstances of his life. The notion that there are all of these other illegitimate children. Look, Rufus's father was such an extraordinary person
that he was awful to his child.
No, he wasn't.
Oh.
No, he was not awful. He was
out of Rufus's own mouth. He was cold. He was authoritarian. He was a dictator.
He knew how to drive Rufus. He knew what Rufus needed.
I could see that. Yeah.
Excellent. And
if I may,
to be that cold, to be that level to his own child, to insinuate that he wouldn't be that way to someone else if they were his blood, it is insane to me.
So I would argue with you here that maybe he was just being extra cold.
Would we
other
say
people,
that
to his
that
brothers
knowing,
and things, to try and propel them into greatness? If that's your journey you're going on here.
If I may, we're saying that we know that Randolph was not the greatest person. Do you think that it would be possible for him to then accept payment to stage his eldest son's death? Just a question there.
Yes, absolutely. That is totally possible. Anything's possible with the person. As I just stated a little bit ago, we are driven to do incredible things in life if given the right stimulus and the right motivation.
Oh my God.
Randolph Garthwaite knew that his legacy was going to exist through one of his 2 sons.
Yes, based on the help of one of his supposed illegitimate
which
brothers.
There are no others, and there is no real evidence that there are any illegitimate children. There's no evidence.
If you're
but according to Redacted, we're talking
like
about
that,
theories here now.
My
as opposed
name
to facts.
is Gina. I told you to call me Gina, and I also said I don't like to repeat myself.
What is happening? No, look, Randolph knew that he had to drive Rufus. One of his 2 real sons was going to be incredible, and he knew that tempering him would
he
make
did
him better.
2 different things. He did unconditional love to one and then unconditional hate to the other, and saw what panned out. Is that what you're trying to say?
May I add that at the time it was essentially expected for the firstborn child to die at a tragically young age. I mean, life expectancy was fairly old. I add that in as a factor to credit the possibility that Randolph Garthwaite could have staged his eldest son's death, understanding that not only could he receive essentially payment
He was already
for
rich.
his eldest son, but
They owned a rocky precipice.
but also that he would be able to easily cover it up with with the statistics of the
I-
time.
Stage anything.
No, absolutely ridiculous. And this
Good.
friend of a friend, you're pushing really hard for this theory that you said was a friend of a friend. You just keep coming back to it.
I
feel like
I simply want to give everybody equal standing on this platform. This is a platform.
well,
of
they are
freedom
not here on your
and
show,
so
and we have
far,
3 other different opinions that I think we'd
It's
like to talk
difficult.
about.
It is difficult for them.
It is difficult.
It is
Can-
difficult.
can
for
I
them
say
Difficult
appear
to
on the
talk.
show. It is difficult for this friend of a friend to be on the show. That is why I'm giving them.
Well, we're all here
this-
on your
this
show, so I feel like you should give
platform
us
to-
more.
I feel
attention,
like
I
and-
had to cancel a whole class.
Can I say something?
I am also.
You have
I
said
also
so
feel like
much,
I have.
Bitterson.
I've had my
I
hand up
simply-
this
Why
entire
are you
time.
taking your
of
shirt
those that do
I-
not have
Look.
their opinion represent on.
Then why do you have
Well,
us here as
I just
guests
want to
if you don't
say
want our
a
opinion?
real
Simply because
quick,
this platform
important
represents
aspect that
some
needs to
I want to
be.
hear from Bitterson.
some counter to mainstream thought and mainstream media and
Please,
what people.
Lewis.
So for those,
You are the media, man.
I apologize. No, I am not.
I'm
not,
watching you with your headphones and your
Wait,
fancy
I
microphone.
am not the mainstream.
Your
media here.
fancy, your designer tank top.
I am not. This is.
I don't
Can I
understand
just say
things.
one real quick thing?
I just
Please,
bought
please,
this.
please.
Is
at
it
a
real
department
quick
store.
for once? I'd
Yeah.
love
Yes.
to hear it.
It
Dr.
is.
Bitterson, please. Dr. Bitterson, I apologize. Please. go ahead.
Gina,
Yes.
I believe you should put your name instead of redacted. Otherwise, I think you're showing the rest of us that you really have low self-esteem of yourself. There,
Can
I said
you?
it.
I feel
Not
like
what I
this
thought
is
he was
not
gonna say.
Dr. Bitterson, I
a show about
appreciate
me.
your
I think it
opinion
shows
as a
exactly that
psychologist,
she has
but-
repressed feelings
All
about
right,
herself. She
all
has low
right, all right.
self-esteem.
Yeah, no,
Because
I'll
you
change
just
it. I'll change
admitted
it.
that your name
You're
is Gina,
you're
right? Your name is
absolutely
Gina.
right.
Why do you have
You are
redacted on
absolutely
your
right.
on your
I got you. I
Doc-
got you. I
Doc-
heard you loud and clear because
Dr.
you spoke.
Bitterson,
You
I-
spoke very shortly, and there you go. I changed my name.
Dr. Bitterson, I understand that you
That
have your
feels
opinions
better.
as a psychologist.
I feel a
however,
lot better about
um,
myself now. You're
this is
right.
not
My
a
self-esteem
platform-
is
This
we
is
call
not a
this
skyrocketing.
platform
passive aggressive.
that
Dr.
encourages
Bitterson,
ad hominem.
That is
we
petty,
do not.
and you don't deserve that.
If-
Your
we
hand is
may-
still up.
Hmm.
Do you really have something else to
Oh,
say?
If I may
no, I
segue
don't.
us
Not at
back
this
to the
point, no.
topic.
I
at
don't even
hand.
know how to do that.
If I may segue us back to the topic at hand, Reginald
Please.
Garthwaite's death. Do we think that there is at least some malicious intent by any actor?
It's funny you
in
mention
play?
actors because if you want to look back at other people that were at the 12th birthday party, even though Reginald was a very bright boy, he didn't have a lot of friends. But you know what? He needed a lot of witnesses that day. He needed a lot of witnesses to see he and his brother walk away. So what do you think he did? He paid a bunch of students from his school to come to the rocky precipice, enjoy that cake and punch, watch him be a good brother and lead his little brother away and not come back.
This is I have some.
When did this happen?
I have not.
In
It had nothing to do with the
1868
planning of his own
or whatever
party.
the date
I mean,
was. I'm not great with dates, but I'm great with facts.
It was
and-
1878 that he died. If it was
Wonderful.
1868, they were 10 years too early, apparently.
Let's talk about this. When was when you were 12?
Yeah.
How many birthday parties did you plan for yourself?
What are did you not have friends come over to your birthday parties? I
No,
feel like
no,
that
I
explains so
absolutely
much.
did, but my parents planned that birthday
I
party.
handed out my
You-
own
you're
invitations
insinuating
in
Oh,
class.
That he
yeah,
brought a
yeah,
bunch
yeah.
of people over.
I am
that-
saying that he took invitations to his schoolmate chums and
that
passed
his
out
parents
invitations.
definitely
and,
wrote.
and
In
Randolph,
boarding school?
He wasn't in boarding school.
Randolph was very well connected. He could have easily invited. Half.
Do you
the
have you
state of
ever said I
Massachusetts
don't
to
want
this
that kid
rocky
to come to my
precipice.
party because he smells
Oh yeah, I
bad?
definitely
Like
have.
you
and I've been that
definitely
kid.
you definitely have some agency over who comes to your
feel
birthday
like
party. So
this
if I was like,
adds-
I want to invite my entire class,
Uh,
my mom would be like, I love you, little
Gina,
angel.
Gina.
Obviously, we'll do that. And we
Yeah,
did,
but
and
are
it was
you
great.
gonna
And we
make
went to
the-
No, I'm
Fundazzle,
sorry.
and it was
Her
the
name
best
is now
birthday I
Fuck
ever
You
had.
Bitterson. You have to refer to it by
why?
Fuck You
Dr.
Wait,
Bitterson.
Bitterson,
It makes
please.
no sense.
Gina, please. I think that only adds credence to the possibility. This is not. I'm not drawing a conclusion.
Oh.
This adds credence to the possibility that Randolph, having invited many family friends and guests to the estate,
Right.
To act as witnesses for the death of Reginald.
What?
I feel like that adds.
I feel like you are really stretching here.
There's no evidence that there were witnesses to this death.
Well, there were witnesses. There were other children at the house for the party.
I
Yes, who
personally
were
have not
invited by
heard of
his
this
parents.
witnesses thing. I'm not
What?
saying that there were actually other people there. I'm
I
saying
don't
that
know
if
how
there were,
strictly
that
your
simply
parents
adds- that
raised
simply
you that you weren't allowed to invite your
strengthens
own
that theory
friends.
further.
I
And
invited
out
the
invitations.
people that were
Lewis,
in my
are you
class.
suggesting that this was like a
That's what
public
I'm
execution?
saying.
Like all the townspeople
No,
came to watch this
no,
public
I'm saying they
execution?
were in the
No,
house
I-
and they
I
watched
understand.
him
I
hold
understand.
hands, little
That's-
brotherly love, lead him down.
Although that
to
would make a
where
lot
the
of
rock
sense.
was.
This doesn't
Yes.
make any
Borrowing the
sense to me
practice
at all.
over.
And I mean, why does Easter keep moving?
I have to look something up.
Okay.
Don't even get me started on Easter.
It doesn't make sense. Why is it
Don't-
on a different day every year?
without
Pagans.
drawing. Let's draw it back into the. Let's draw the conversation
Oh,
back
I
to
would
the topic
love
of hand.
to.
I would like to take.
I feel like
draw
you all
this
just need to go back to
conversation-
college,
I'd
take an
like to
history,
take this conversation-
psychological 101.
I would
Sorry, did you just tell me
never go to
You need to
college.
take a basic psych
Never go to
101 to
college.
understand the difference
I
between
have
cognitive,
you
my
emotional,
time
behavioral.
and a platform.
I
What?
just
to I have
Standing on a
time
platform is
and a platform
look,
to
I-
share
I-
look, we are all on a
Platform,
platform
no.
right now. We're trying to give
You
ourselves
guys
You,
are
however, can
talking over me because
And I
I'm a
feel like-
woman. I
I
feel like, and I really don't
for us,
appreciate
for
it.
Oh my
the
God,
I feel like I'm
there's
in
so much
nothing but
sensory
polite.
deprivation in here.
to go back
I-
to the topic.
Are
of-
you
my God,
telling me
still
that you're going to be
talking.
looking me right in my eye
I
and
think
tell me that
Are
all
you
these
guys
theories are
get
completely
back
to
true
Mariah's
because there's
dark
not
place?
enough
Topic of the
evidence here?
episode.
You are
Someone
literally
gives
living in a
me
delusion
narrative.
right now.
Is
I'm
reading
You are
and
living in a
regurgitating
delusion.
other
This
I want
is
you to
my
look me
this
in the eye
is
and
my
tell me that all of these
podcast.
facts are
This
true.
is
All
my
of these
podcast.
theories are true.
Own,
Look me
like,
right in the
Why are
eye.
you
opinion.
getting in the camera
This
like
is
that?
my
Scary.
podcast.
I
I
feel like
decide
you
what
are
the topic will
unhinged.
be.
Unhinged
we
Bitterson.
get back into the
You
topic.
have
This is
such
why
a
people
traumatic
don't
life.
listen to
I
podcasts.
wish
wrong
you
with you?
all the
Darn.
best.
My
What
God.
is-
Fuck you, Bitterson.
He was too powerful.
You have your Lincolns and your Jacksons. Give me Garthwaite. Garthwaite's story is the American story.
Garthwaite, a film by Ben Kearns.